Okay. Basically, we want to just kind of talk about some of your memories early, if you've got early childhood memories, um, anything that you might remember about our grandparents, my great grandparents, but your grandparents, J.E. and Leela, and anything that you might remember about the way they looked or their personalities or any kind of memories that you've got
Okay.
of those grandparents.
Okay.
And then maybe we'll talk a little bit more about your parents and, aunts and uncles and
Okay.
cousins, wherever you want to go with it. That's what we want.
Well, I can tell you more about Grandpa than I can about Grandma
Okay.
because, see, we left DeWitt and moved to Wynn in 1940. I just looked at some old records, and I think we were up there. Could have been the end of '44. Uh, Daddy made a crop up there in '45 and '46, and then we came back to DeWitt, and then we moved to Dumas, and then in '51 come back to DeWitt. But as far as grandmother is concerned, Grandma, I don't remember other than the fact that she was a plump little lady, gray hair. Uh, I was just a young kid, and but I do remember those features. But anything about her cooking or anything like that, Grandpa, uh, he dearly loved me. He would have done anything for me, and he he smoked a pipe. He was either filling that pipe or cleaning it out, one of the two.
Okay.
And he had a handlebar mustache. And when he wasn't smoking a pipe, he was twirling on that handlebar mustache. He was a thin gentleman, uh, very calm, didn't seem to get upset about anything. I don't ever remember him having a job. He was at the age, I guess, uh, at that time that I never knew him to do anything. And after grandmother died, well, then he was living with different members of his family. May quite a bit. He stayed with Laverne and Otis a lot. He stayed with us quite a bit.
Okay.
Uh, when we were, well, I may be getting ahead of myself, but when we were in Wynn, he would come up to see us, and then when it got time for him to go home, I'd always, most of the time, I would come back to DeWitt with him, and we'd ride the train.
Okay.
We'd get on that train over at Fair Oaks,
Okay.
and we lived out of Wynn about 4 or 5 miles on 64. And we'd ride that train to Stuttgart, and then Otis and Laverne would pick us up and bring us on to DeWitt, and we stayed with them most of the time when I was down here with him, when I would come with him. But he just, he well, like all of my aunts and uncles, they seemed to be, I won't say all of them, but they seemed to be calm people. You and I guess that's gonna be hard for me to say this, that they didn't seem to get mad real easy, but I've got a case or two I can tell you where one of them got real mad, and But anyway, that's basically what I know about him. I never knew him to own an automobile.
Okay.
Just they were of the age, I guess, that well, they just didn't have a car. Times were hard, and but they always had a big garden south of the house, just south of where the old home house was. They had a big garden always, and I do remember that. Remember them having hogs and cows, and but as far as him, basically, that's about all I can tell you. Other than I thought the world of him, he would have done anything for me, and but that's about all. And like I say, as far as grandmother's concerned, I just really, I was so young that I just didn't pay any attention.
So the memories that you're talking about, would have been maybe between 6 and 10 years of age?
No, I would have had to have been young. Well, I started the school in Wynn in the first grade.
Okay.
In a country school.
Okay.
And so I would say I was approximately 6 years old when I started the school up there. So I would have been younger than that of my memory, especially of grandmother. But I had memories of grandpa up until we moved to Dumas in 51, I think is when we moved to Dumas. And so I had more years with him than I did with her. And but
I believe she passed away in 1949.
I believe it said 49.
And then he passed away in 55. So, but you would have had some memories of both of them still living in the same household together.
Well, yes, but very few of them living in that. I do remember them living in the old home place because of the family get-togethers that we would have there. The family would always gather there and have dinners and just gather and just and because it was a close-knit family there.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question here, because I'm not sure on my geography of exactly where the old home place is. From your house here, you go on down to Gander Street, and then from Gander Street, where?
You go down Gander Street, and there's a Hornbeck Lane there. And there's a house trailer that sits right in the corner. Ronnie and Virginia live there now. Carol, when they came back from Texas, they built that house there. And I had already tore the old house down. And the old house was roughly just rough sawn lumber on the outside. Maybe one with a little, maybe not a gap, but then another one lapping where it split. And the inside, I should have had taken some pictures, but I didn't have a phone at that time to take pictures with, didn't carry a camera around with me. And so the best I remember, it had wallpaper on the inside, which most old houses did at that time. And but
so it's the farm place would have been right off there from Gander Street then.
Well, it's about a mile down there to the house.
Okay, so you go on.
If you want to go down there, you go down. Well, you could. If you don't want to get on, you're gonna have to get on the gravel if you go down there.
Sure.
And but best thing to do would be go back up here and hit 65, go down 1 mile, get the highway, and go down to the second road on the left, well, Gander Street.
Gander Street, okay.
And I think there's a sign on it, but it's there's a wheat field and then a new well been put down right in the corner there.
Okay.
And you can turn down there and go to the first road that turns back to the right. It's a mile down there from, and it's Hornbeck Lane.
Okay.
Now, Ronnie and Virginia could be home. They've been in Texas.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether they'd be home or not.
Yeah, that's kind of where I thought it was, but I don't know that I really ever knew exactly where the Hornbeck place was. So I know where you live.
That's right.
And where your mom and dad lived. So that would have been further north, and then you go past Uncle Casey's and Aunt Grace's and Uncle.
Well, it was Mildred lived up the road.
Mm-hmm.
Edna lived over where Tyler and Paige have a home now.
Okay.
He bought that piece of property from Dale. Edna had left it to Dale, and when
now
she died,
Tyler is
Troy's oldest son.
So you've got Jeff and Troy
and John.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
let me write those down because I remember Jeff, Troy, and then John.
Yeah.
Okay, and Tyler is
Troy's oldest son.
Okay. All right.
And he's got another son named Colin.
Okay.
Jeff has two boys.
Okay.
R.A. He's got a name, Reed Anthony, isn't it, John? Reed? No, it's not Reed. Anyway, they call him R.A.
They call him R.A.
And then Seth, S-E-T-H.
Okay.
John has a girl and a boy, Taylor and Holden.
Right, that's a girl. Okay, and Holden. Okay. All right. So Tyler lives, and tell me again where it is Tyler lives?
He lived where Edna lived.
Okay.
Well, from Ronnie's house, if you go down there, from Ronnie's house, you just look back across the field, back this way, and it's a big two-story house over there.
Okay.
And you can see it.
Okay.
He's bought the old Hornbeck place from Ronnie.
Okay.
Ronnie gave him an opportunity to buy it, so he's.
So it's still in the.
It's still in the Hornbeck family. And that's what he. That's why he wanted it, and I think that's the reason Ronnie sold it to him.
I think that makes good sense.
Yeah. And so.
Okay.
I was glad of that. I had talked with Vern about it before she passed away, and but anyway, that's
where it is. Okay. Well, we'll run down there. If not this trip, we'll make sure that we get down there because I want to sear it in my memory exactly where it is.
Well, it wasn't much of a place, but it was home.
Mm-hmm.
It was where they made a living.
Right.
And this is some stuff I can tell you later that you can write down if you want to write it down. I remember Dad telling me that they tried to clear an acre of land a year in the winter. Mm-hmm. Of course, they cut the trees and used the wood for the trees for heating. Mm-hmm. But they tried to clear an acre.
Yeah.
And Lester told me the reason that a lot of the people moved back along the boughs because this land here was so soft that you couldn't farm it. Really? It had sage grass growing on it, and it just never been drained, and it just too boggy. They couldn't horses. They couldn't use horses, so they moved back in next to the boughs where the high land was, and it stayed dry, so it dried out quicker. And that's the reason most of a lot of the homes were back in around these boughs and
Yeah,
all.
yeah.
And so, kind of like the Indians.
Mm-hmm.
The Indians did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Those I love those stories. Those are great. Um, you talked about fishing, and did you go? You went fishing with Grandpa Hornbeck?
no,
Then? No,
no.
you didn't.
I went fishing with my dad
Okay.
very few times.
Mm-hmm.
I had very little. Jones asked me this a lot of times. Do I remember having conversations with Dad?
Mm-hmm.
And I know we did,
Mm-hmm.
but I just don't remember them. I remember we duck hunted together.
Yeah.
And we fished a time or two. I've got a picture of where he and I had been fishing and caught
Mm-hmm.
some fish. We fished back in there along the bow.
Mm-hmm.
And but as far as memories of me and him having good conversations, I can't honestly say because he passed away the year I
He
graduated.
was so young.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Those.
never really talked with Mother a
Yeah.
lot like I should have because she moved to Mississippi in about 2 years after
Yeah.
Dad died. And so,
And those would have been hard conversations to have.
well,
Yeah.
she was, you know, she was a widow woman with two young
Yeah.
children and
Yeah.
a teenage boy and didn't have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure she didn't have any money.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, it
Yeah.
was just rough
Yeah.
times. And
Yeah.
but
Well, when we're young, we don't think about all those questions we have now.
right, that's
I mean, I had many more years with my dad, and I still think of questions now I wished I'd asked him, and that's hard.
well. Your mom and dad and daddy and mother were real close
Mm-hmm.
when they
Yeah.
were younger.
Yeah.
I don't know what age for sure, but I've got pictures of them.
Yeah, I have memories just because what Daddy told me,
Mm-hmm.
but he and I have seen photos of all of them together
Right,
when they were young
right.
and handsome,
Yeah, right.
girls and boys.
Yeah, they were.
But your mom and dad were witnesses at my mom and dad's wedding, which was just in the parsonage
Okay.
there at First Christian. And but yeah, they were real close.
Yeah, they were.
Real close. And Margie and Orville also.
Yeah, they
I
were.
think.
Yeah.
And in our family, we always knew him as Orville, but I think in the Hornbeck family, he was often known as Mike.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So I never.
I called him Uncle Orville.
Okay. Did
is
you?
what I
Okay.
called him.
Okay.
And Orville and I we worked together quite a bit after Dad died,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked with him more than I did any of the rest of them. Maybe Lester, I worked with him, and I've got some stories that he told me about uh, how things were back years ago.
Yeah.
Do you want me to add these stories in as we go?
I want you don't you think? I think train of thought. That's good.
Okay.
Just as they flow, let's talk about them. Yeah.
Well, Lester told me, and I bought his equipment from him, and he rented me this farm. And then I eventually bought it from him, and they had the right to live in the house until they passed away or decided to move out.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that whenever they were farming rice back then. They was out on White River Prairie. I'm almost certain where they were, the way he talked.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd go to the field before daylight. He had a 2-gallon jug with burlap sacks wrapped around it, and he put his water in that. And he'd go to the field, and they didn't have any good way to pull these levees.
Mm-hmm.
So as they filled those levees with water, if they had a place where water was running over, it didn't make any difference if it was 100 yards long or 10 foot long. He said they shoveled all day long. And they went back home. They walked back home after dark. I mean, it was,
oh my goodness,
it was hard times, real
wow.
hard times.
Yeah.
And he also told me that I don't know whether it was before the Depression or it was after the Depression had started. They had rice that they could have got $4 a bushel for, and they didn't sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So they held on to it, and then they eventually shipped it to New Orleans. When it got to New Orleans, they wouldn't pay them nothing for the rice and bill them for the freight.
Oh my gosh. So what would have been their regular rate to sell it? You said they could have gotten $4.
Yeah.
What would have normally have been?
I took it that was an extremely good price.
Good. Okay.
It sounds like it would have been an extremely good price, and I don't understand why they wouldn't have sold it, because I know rice has not been selling that high at that time.
Yeah.
So that's just the way life is, you know, but I don't know what they did after that, because I know they probably didn't have any money to maybe make another crop. I just don't know. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah, and this was Lester, when Lester was an adult.
That's right. And whenever we were working together. And I've got a story about Orville. He told me that during the Depression that they were starving to death. He said we were absolutely starving. And he said they came out with the CCC. And he said, I lied about my age to get on the CCC program, and so I could get a job. So I looked up the CCC the other day, just my own curiosity. I wanted to know how it started and what. When they first started it, you had to be 18 years old to get to join. Well, he was 17, so he lied. Okay, they paid him $30 a month. They sent 25 of it to the family, and 5 of it was they kept. And so, and I don't know where he was stationed. That somebody tells me that down at St. Charles, they had a CC camp down there. And I take it maybe that's where he was. And but I've got a lot of good memories of Orville and I. We should have done a lot of things together that we never did. I was busy trying to make a living and trying to farm as much as I could farm, and we just didn't take the time. We could have fished together some and had a good time, and we just didn't. And and then I've got a story about Casey. These are just things that I remember in my mind that they told me. And
tell me.
Casey told me standing there. Casey and I had a lot of conversation. because I was a young boy, and standing there in front of his house. And he told me that there was a banker from Pine Bluff come over there to see him and told him, he said, Mr. Turner, if you will take this land from this road to what the highway is now and just farm it, you can pay for it any way you want to pay for it. And he said, I told him, I appreciate it, but I just bought this farm that I'm on now from L.A. Black. And chances are I won't ever pay for it. But as it turned out, he told me, I'll tell you about the end, how he paid for it. But right now, he told me he was plowing one of his fields with an old Fordson tractor. And they were sitting down there in the woods for a long time. And he said, I looked down in the seat behind me and my billfold was in the seat, and said I had two $20 bills in that billfold. And he said, if I'd have lost that billfold, chances are I would have lost the crop. I lost the farm. He said I could almost make a crop on those two $20 bills. And so he got a crop in. There was Lespedeza growing on that farm when he bought it. Lespedeza was a good money maker crop for people if they got it before the rain shattered it off. But he told me that he cut enough Lespedeza off of that farm to pay for it the first year. It was growing on the farm, and he cut enough Lespedeza off of it to pay for the farm. Wow. He said, I went in, I had the money, and I went in to pay L.A. Black for the farm. And he said, he told me, you can't pay me for this farm. He said, how come I can't? I got the money. And said he paid for it the first year. So that's the good fortune, you know. Wow. And so I did a lot of things for Casey. Us boys did, Dale, Lawrence Edward, Buddy Holden. Yeah. We put a lot of hay in that old big barn that he had there. We'd go down below Gillette. He would find some place down there to bale hay, and we'd haul hay back to that barn. And I drove a tractor for him. And this is another thing that stuck in my mind. He paid me $4 a day. And most of it was when I was driving a tractor. This other stuff, he didn't pay me nothing. Whenever he was a fine gentleman. He was as good as he could be, but he loved free labor. I mean, Buddy Holden, before he passed away, he told me that, you know, Uncle Casey was a good man, but he got a lot of free labor out of us boys. And so, you know, he would do anything. He would loan me anything I need to borrow. And we just helped each other out, you know, and we had a lot of good conversations. And, that's about as far as my daddy, I don't have any memory of anything like that we talked about. Carol, I really don't have any memories of me and him having talks like that, or talking about things like that, because for one thing, they lived in Dumas, moved to Dumas. And then they moved on to Texas. And then when he come back, he helped me some. I had a surveying business, and he run one of my surveying rigs for me.
Yeah.
And, but I've told you all of my tales that I had to tell, and we hadn't talked about.
Well, we can circle back around on some of these. Now, let's go back to your.
Troy lives in this house right next to us.
Oh, okay.
And John lives in the house next to him.
Okay. Okay.
And Jeff lives in Big Flat, Arkansas, around Mountain View.
Oh, okay.
He moved up there
Okay.
after he retired and turned the farm over to the boys.
Okay.
And
I guess Jeff would be old enough to retire now, wouldn't he?
Well, he just turned 65,
Okay.
I think. He got his first Social Security check.
There you go.
And but
so he's in Big Flat. Okay. So you've got Troy and John just real close to you. Okay. So then your grandchildren, do any of them they still live around? Well, you said Tyler lives over. What about RA and Seth?
Seth R.A. lives in town.
Okay.
Just outside of town.
Okay.
And Seth built a new house down on the Fog place that we bought.
Oh, okay.
Down by the substation.
Okay.
You would turn there and go a
yeah.
quarter of a mile, and his house is on the left.
Okay.
And
okay. And then how about Troy's? Well, we know Tyler lives over there.
Yeah, Colin, the youngest son, lives in Carl Juanita's old home place.
Oh, okay.
Troy and Tammy bought this farm from when Juanita passed away.
Well, so this was the Turner. That's what I thought, that this would have to have been the Turner farm.
That's right.
Okay.
Carl Juanita owned this 320 acres across the road. And
so I thought Terry he moved back to DeWitt, but did he just run the elevator? He didn't farm?
Yes, he farmed for a while, and then he got in the seed business. And we were in the seed business, and the seed business is not an easy business to run.
Yeah.
And he put a lot of money in a building over here on the highway, and then things went bad, or it went bad for him.
Yeah.
And so they built this house right across the road over here. And they had to sell the house and move to town.
Okay.
And but he lives in Texas now. He moved to Texas just this past couple months with his son. His son lives in Texas.
Okay.
And Carolyn also lives in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Carolyn's not in very good health.
Oh, that's his wife, or?
Well, they got a divorce, and but they're still real close friends.
Yeah.
And so.
Okay. So I thought that this would have been the Turner. So, okay. So how about Taylor and Holden? Where are they?
Well, that's a completely different story.
Okay. Different generation. Well, that's okay.
Well, I don't mind telling you.
Okay.
John and Tiffany got a divorce, which is a bad thing. And we've had too many of those in the family. But anyway, John has disabled both of them by just giving them things.
Oh, yeah.
He's given them anything they ever wanted, and it really has disabled them. But now Taylor is working for him. He owns this Southern Ag here in town.
Oh, okay.
That Dean and them
Oh,
owned.
okay.
He bought that from Dean and them. John does. And she's started working for him.
Okay.
She never could seem to get her life straightened out. I mean, she wasn't ever on drugs or anything like that.
Yeah.
She just beat to a different drum.
I get you.
She,
I hear what you're saying.
but
she's still living close.
Right, she lives in DeWitt.
Okay. How about Holden?
Holden lives in Stuttgart.
In Stuttgart. Okay.
And
okay.
He's gonna be married in April.
Okay.
But he's been living with this girl for 2 years.
Yeah.
No, 2 years. Well, no, they had a child, so.
It's longer than 2. That's okay. You don't have to say anymore.
And
it's a different generation. You're right.
And that's basically Taylor Catherine's expecting, and she's not married. So we're talking about a completely. You might want to delete a lot of this.
That's okay. You love them still.
Right.
You love them still.
And
okay. Well, you've got your bunch fairly close geographically. So, okay. Can you think of any questions while I take a breath?
Yeah, kind of on that note, as you think about your grandparents, Hornbecks, and your father and mother, what are some of the traits of in their homes that you would like to see, that you would want your grandchildren, your great grandchildren to model? What's something that a memory that you want to see live on?
Well, I'd like to see them all attend church. And we've only got one couple, and that's Seth and his wife, that's going to church. And they all grew up in the church, our boys.
Mm-hmm.
They were all baptized in the church. But for some reason, they got away. Mm-hmm. And it just doesn't seem like they have any desire to come back. Yeah. Now, Jeff was going to a little church up in Big Flat when he first went up there. Diane is Lutheran, and she wouldn't go with him. And he didn't like the Lutheran church, so he was going by himself for a while. Troy and Tammy, they had some disagreements with how things were being run at the First Christian Church, and they don't go anymore. Yeah. R.A. and his wife, I don't think go anywhere. Tyler and Paige, they've got 3 girls, and they begin to go to Faith Baptist. Mm-hmm. And Holden and Jada, they are going to church with his mother, a Methodist church. Yeah. And Taylor's not going anywhere. And I'm trying to talk her into either coming to our church, which we don't have but about 25 anymore. So no children, no young people. I'm trying to get her just to go to any church. Faith Baptist is a good church. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of activity out there. They have a lot of young people. So I'm not so much worried about where she goes. I just want her to go somewhere. Yeah. I want her to raise that baby in a Christian, church family.
Waymon, talk to us about some of your memories of the church or faith in your home and in maybe in grandparents' home growing up.
And there again, all the time we were in Wynn and Dumas, we never went to church. It was after we come back in 51 and moved down on the old Butler place on Gander Street. And I think the reason that we started going then was partly because of your mother and dad and Orville and Margie.
Mm-hmm.
And of course Casey and Grace went.
Yeah.
And Dad and Mom started going there, and I was baptized in the First Christian Church, on the old church.
Right.
And
right.
So I didn't have a lot of church history until we come back here, and Joan and I got married, and we've always gone to church. Joan was a Baptist, and she was rebaptized into the Christian church because of the fact that the Baptist church maybe doesn't believe as strong in baptism as what the Christian church does. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
she could tell you about that,
Yeah.
but that's the main reason. But I don't know, there's just not a lot of desire, don't seem like, for these young kids to want to go to church.
Yeah.
At least here. Now, in other places they may be, but
I remember that I asked my dad, Roger, one time, and this was after I was an adult, and when they started going to the Christian church, because I knew that my mother grew up in the Methodist church. And he said, well, we did. I said, I can't remember the question I asked him specifically, but he said, we didn't go to church, but until after Marilyn was born, and she was born 2 years after they got married. And he said, and I said, well, why did you start when you did? And he said, Mrs. Eddy came and told me that I needed to start taking my family to church. And I think he had a lot of respect for Mrs. Eddy. And so they did start to go. So maybe I don't think that Oscar and May went to church before then. And so he didn't grow up. Daddy, Roger, didn't end up grow up going to church. So it may be that after they were adults and married, someone encouraged them that they respected to go to church, and they felt a need to go to church, or felt a need for something greater than what they had. And which isn't that for all of us, we feel a need for something greater than what we already are feeling in our lives. And so that was his response to me. And in my spiritual path, I've had times that I've been not as active, didn't feel as spiritually led, and I've struggled. But when I found a need and I found a group of Christians that I felt accepted me, I felt more spiritually led and inclined to attend. So it may be that maybe that's what all of us need, and your encouragement to them, and them seeing that life that you've always lived, and because you saw the life, that others that you respected that were also relatives, that's what encourages us.
I don't remember. any of the Hornbeck girls other than Laverne
Mm-hmm.
and Otis. Now they went to the Christian church, and I'm sure Aunt Mildred went, but she didn't go that often.
They
I
weren't
don't think.
as
active
often.
as
Lester and Carrie.
right.
Edna attended, but I don't. Edna
Mhm.
Ross. Aunt Eunice attended also. Her husband, I don't think, did.
No, Homer didn't.
Mildred did, and
B didn't go.
and then Orville and Margie. And I was too young to remember how active your dad and mom were. But you remembered going to church as you were.
Well, they were active. We come back here in 51. I'm not sure it was right at the very start that we started going to church or not. But then, of course, they were active until Dad died.
Sure.
And then Mother all went, but then it wasn't but 2 years till she moved to Mississippi.
Yeah.
She still went to church over there, but it wasn't. Well, they did go to a Christian church over in Clarksdale, is where.
Well, I'll have to admit that some of my biggest encouragement was my Hornbeck relatives at the Christian church.
Who?
The Hornbeck relatives at the Christian church. Of course, as you recall, back during the 50s and the 60s, probably 50% of the church was related to Hornbecks in some way.
That's true, yeah.
And so I, of course, we went to school in Gillette, and I knew more people at church in DeWitt than I did, in Gillette, other than to go to school with them. So most of my church memories are with people that I was related to, or were related by, marrying, someone that was a Hornbeck or Hornbeck related. So, yeah. Any other questions, Matthew?
No. You guys are doing good. You got lots of good stuff.
Let me look down through here and see if it's. Well, I'll tell you about my school.
Okay, good.
I had a rough time in my first 4 years of school.
And where did you go?
I started in Wynn in the first grade, in a one-room schoolhouse. Didn't know anybody. Got a whipping the first year.
No.
Yeah,
that's bad.
That really started my year off right. The next year, they consolidated, and I went to a school in Wynn. Didn't know anybody. I'd leave sometimes at noon and walk uptown. The school was right in town.
Yeah.
In the second grade. I'd get back to school in time to get on the bus. I don't know how many times I did that, but I remember doing it once or twice. Then we moved back to DeWitt, and I went to Prairie Gym under Miss Myrtle Raxton. Okay. And that was in a one-room schoolhouse. And but my kinfolks were all there.
Mm-hmm.
I knew everybody there. That was the best year that I had in school getting started.
Mm-hmm.
The first two just didn't amount to anything.
Yeah.
And then we moved to Dumas after that. I didn't know anybody. So I had a rough 4 years trying to get started in school, and I can tell you those should be the best years for a child getting started in school.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a bad situation. I didn't like school. I was always feeling bad. Now I'm telling off on myself. So mother would put me in bed when I wouldn't go to school, and that was pretty regular. She'd give me castor oil every hour. And if you've never tasted castor oil, you just don't know. You'd think that would put you on. You'd think that would put you on the bus.
Yeah.
But it didn't. But I can tell you what did put me on the bus. My grandpa was down there. We lived in Dumas. Might have been in the first half of the fifth. It could have been in the tail end of the fourth. And he kept telling me, Waymon, your daddy's going to whip you if you don't get on that bus. Well, he hadn't whipped me yet. But I can tell you, when he turned me loose that morning, I went straight for that bus. And I got a feeling it hurt my grandpa as bad as it did me. And I got on that bus every morning after that. So I know what a good whipping will do. Chances are, if they'd have checked me at school that day, they might have locked him up. Because I know I had whips across my bottom and my back where he whipped me. I didn't hold it against him. It was the best thing he ever did for me. Because it put me on that school bus, and
And this was Grandpa Hornbeck.
Yeah.
Okay.
It wasn't Grandpa whipped me, my daddy whipped me.
Your daddy whipped you.
My daddy whipped me.
Okay.
He was working on an old D. John Deere tractor out there in the shed. And I guess he had just had all of it he could take. And I tell you, I was so glad when he turned me loose. I headed right to that bus.
Yeah.
And I got on it every day after that. And then we come back to DeWitt in the last half, the fifth, and that's really when I consider my school year starting.
Okay.
Was about the last half of the fifth grade.
Yeah.
And so I had a very rough time the first 4 years getting started.
Yeah.
And so don't have anything but a 12th grade education. And but life's been good. The Lord's been good to Joan and I.
Yeah.
He's blessed us in more ways than we ever imagined. We moved in with Mother, and I'm telling you things now that you probably don't want on there, but we moved in with my mother after Dad died, after we got married, and that was a mistake. She was, like I said, she was a widow woman with 2 young children and no way to make a living. And that's not a good situation. So, but after she moved to town and things began to turn around, and we, I might not ought to be telling all this.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we're not going to be playing all this real personal stuff, so that's so you just.
You might want to mark some of that off.
Yeah, we're
I guess you the one that had the $300, wasn't it? She'd work for her daddy and save $300, and we went to Dante's in Dumas
Mm-hmm.
and bought a couch. Yeah, on sale. It had to be on sale.
$300
That's a lot of
would
money.
buy a lot of things back then.
And bought a table and a round table and moved upstairs in that old Butler house.
Mm-hmm.
And that, when I talk about the Butler house, that reminded me of something Otis Low Ranch told me about during the 27 flood. And
Oh, yeah, I want to hear that.
but anyway, like I said, the Lord blessed us. He gave us more opportunity, Teresa, than we ever dreamed we'd have. We've traveled all over the United States, been to Alaska 3 times, and didn't travel fancy, but we went in a pickup and a pickup camper. Had the best time we ever had.
Yeah.
And but what I'll tell you about that, what Otis told me, they lived in that old Butler house.
Okay, now when you talk about the old Butler house, is that the one that your mom and dad lived in?
That's right.
Okay, and then you lived there, and that's just off Gander Street.
That's right. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not there now.
Well, that's where I remember
Yeah,
you.
that's
living.
right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
just up from where the light was. You never heard anybody talk about the light on Gander?
The light, yes, the gas light or whatever it was. That was down in there, wasn't it?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I had forgotten about that.
I
The
went
strip
home.
light on Gander Street.
I went home at night, and I thought that was that light. And when I got out of the car, I hit the front door running wide open. And so, you know, but I'll tell you what Otis told me. During the flood of 1927, him and Laverne lived in that house.
Okay.
And they boated in to the second step going upstairs. That's how high the water was.
Oh my goodness.
And that's when it completely flooded Gillette down there and all. You've seen pictures, I'm sure.
I'm sure I have. It's been a while.
Streets flooded.
Yeah.
And
that was because the bayou was up, or was that when the levee broke?
Well, it was just a flood.
Oh, okay.
The 27 flood. But my understanding was that the Corps or whoever controlled that levee gate wouldn't open the gate to let this water out.
Okay.
They were wanting the water to get out of the river.
Okay.
So somebody from Gillette, or where I took it, it was from Gillette, they went down there and blew the levee with dynamite to let the water out. On down below where the floodgate is.
Right.
Call it the blue hole down there now. That's what they used to call it. I've never seen it, so I don't know.
Huh. Okay.
But Otis and Laverne and Glenda, they took me a lot of places. Whenever I was young, they took me to the zoo in Memphis, and I was just real close with Glenda and Otis Laverne. And
well, speaking of Glenda, does she live down where McGee?
Well, she lived below McGee.
Okay.
Where the road comes out from Dermont.
Okay. Oh, okay.
She lives right on highway, I guess it's 65.
Okay.
I don't know where it's, maybe 165 and 65. But now, I don't know where Glenda's at now. I need to try to get in touch with her. I've been saying that.
Joyce was saying that she thought maybe she had moved in with her daughter somewhere.
Well, Dolores told me that her daughter had been trying to get her to move in with her because she was getting Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And but Glenda just wouldn't do it. But now I hope she has moved in with her daughter by now. And we used to meet, us and Dale and Sylvia and Bobby Hudspeth and Dwayne and Barbara. We would go to Pickens in the little restaurant there at Pickens. And then Dale lived in Lake Village, so he'd pick Glenda up and bring her up there. And we'd have lunch there and had some real good visits there. And but then it just, you know, how things pass away, and Dale passed away, and Dwayne and Barbara moved off, and so that's just the way things happen. Sins and
it's life. Well, she was one that I didn't have. Dermont, that's what Joanne had given me, but she didn't have an address for, so.
And I need to tell you about Dad.
Oh, okay.
And I've been just talking in circles here and talking about a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have. But now my daddy's name.
We won't tell any secrets.
Okay. You swear. Get the Bible, Joan. I want to.
I wouldn't have been able to move in with my mother-in-law under any circumstances. So. Well, we were for church mass. We didn't know. And you wanted to be together, and so that's what you did.
My daddy's name was R.A. That's all it was.
Okay.
Just R.A.
Well, and that where I picked up that Robert A. was like on some of the records I was looking at. It had a Robert A. And I thought that's the only. But I had never heard of anything other than R.A. Right. So that is not.
And he had a twin brother.
Okay.
Named R.E.
Okay. Do you know anything about the history of that? Did the other baby live for any length of time? Do you know?
I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
I don't even know where he was buried.
Okay.
I let all the girls and men get away before I found out where he was buried.
Yeah.
Now, I asked Mildred one time, she said, I don't remember other than I remember walking across a field. And, but Carol and Vern tried real hard to find out where he was buried, but they never did find out. I've got a suspicion that maybe he was buried over there on the Hornbeck place somewhere.
Well, I mean, because lots of times if a baby dies at birth, it isn't like, you don't find records.
Right.
And there may not be a service or a burial per se.
I'm sure there wasn't anything as far as that's concerned, as far as that. And I've got a feeling he died pretty young, maybe just a few months.
Yeah.
But I don't know that for certain.
Okay.
But
I appreciate knowing what you do know, because I had not known that. Okay.
And I noticed you got 19 Ira.
Marilyn, my sister, had done some research, and she had seen, like on obituaries, that someone had listed a child's name Ira but I said, I've not seen that anywhere. So I had not ever heard about it.
I hadn't either. I never did hear.
So I'm okay. So unless somebody else has any facts about it, I don't.
But I don't know who it would be now that would know.
Yeah, that would have been the very next year. Because the way some of these genealogy websites somebody will list something, and it may be another Hornbeck
Right,
family.
that's
Totally,
true.
you know.
Uh,
So that's why I was real hesitant to. That's why I put a big question mark in front of it. You mentioned Dolores? Is she still got a pretty good memory? Dolores, is she doing pretty good? I'm curious about whether I think that um, Marilyn or Joanne was maybe going to try to interview her.
Okay.
Um,
The last thing I heard about Dolores was that she wasn't doing too well.
okay.
I used to talk to her every once in a while, but I haven't talked with her in a while.
Okay.
I'll tell you what my sister said. She was going, when she was at the reunion last year, she was going out there and see Dolores. Well, they went out there and Dolores wasn't home, but they opened the door and hollered, and she said she must have a house full of cats, and said it smelled terrible in that house with those cats.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been out there. I don't know that for a fact, and she only opened the door, and so.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've got Dolores's telephone number, and
Does she live in town?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
when you come in town,
Mm-hmm.
where Producers Rice, you know where Dean Robinson Seed Company is?
Okay. Are we talking about going
No, when you
north
coming in town,
from
yeah.
Stuttgart?
When
Okay.
you turn there where the old Chevrolet place is,
Okay.
and
Okay.
head south,
Okay.
where the old railroad track used to
Mm-hmm.
be, Dean's got a seed company there.
Okay.
And you turn in that driveway, just the first one across the railroad tracks, and go down beside where his office is. She lives back there in a house
Okay.
where her and Larry live.
Okay.
And
Okay.
but
It's got the address that Joanne had written is L&D Lane. So that must be the name of it, her street address. Well, I had understood that she lived in that area. So
yeah, she
and I
lives
think,
right back in there
okay,
behind the seed company.
I think Marilyn knows where it is. So I Joanne had just said she talks a lot. So, I didn't know whether that was.
She talks more than me. You'll never get away from her if you go out
Well,
there.
I haven't seen her in years, and so I don't.
You
I
want to
wouldn't
have
know.
plenty of time if you go out there.
Okay.
Bless her heart. We were all close
Yeah.
when we lived down there,
Sure.
Merlin and Dolores and Dale and Lawrence Edward, and we were all just right in there together, and so, but
It's is there anything else that you want your grandkids, your kids, grandkids, great grandkids, and then their great grandkids to know in the future? Because that's our goal, is to have something that we can have more of an oral history that's passed down.
well, I'd have to think about that a little bit.
Well, okay. You can think about that, and you can let me know later if you want to. But you think about it right now, too.
Well, we always want our family to do better than what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a tendency sometimes to overdo. And I think that's what's happened to a lot of the families. I think the telephone, I think these iPads, these games has been not good for the family. You know, if you take the family out to eat, the younger ones, you can't have a conversation because they on the phone. They don't have family meals anymore like we used to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that this country needs to go back to, where the family sits down and they have meals and fellowship together.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not but one time a day,
Yeah.
and talk, and they don't do that much anymore. It's all fast food stuff anymore. I think they need a work ethics that a lot of them are lacking because they've had too much.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I went to work the year Dad died. I probably might have been 18. And I've told Joan this. I enjoyed doing what I did. I'm sure I was tired and I was wore out a lot of days, but I never dreaded getting up and going to work because I enjoyed what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to me, I don't care what you do, if you enjoy working where you're working, then that's where you ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
To have had to have worked for somebody that I didn't enjoy being around and didn't appreciate what I was doing would have been hard on me.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been my own boss. I've only had 2 jobs, and they was when I was in school.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for Cal Osterhide, probably in the 11th grade, driving a loader. And I worked on the highway department my senior year, building that road from Gillette to the post.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's the only 2 jobs I've ever had. And the rest of the time I worked for myself.
Mm-hmm. As a farmer.
As a farmer.
And
other things that
yeah,
we did.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I know everybody don't have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any way to go but up because I didn't have anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, we didn't have anything. I started farming this place of Lester's. I bought his equipment in later years and finally bought the place. The best opportunity that I ever had was Marvin Erstein was driving an oil truck.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working over here on the old Hornbeck place. And I guess he could see that I was willing to work. And he asked me if would I be interested in farming his farm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only man that I ever had come to me and ask me would I be interested in farming his farm.
Mm-hmm.
And of course at that time I was just interested in increasing my acreage and getting bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I took it, and it was a blessing for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had Lester, and here I'm just talking about a lot of stuff.
Oh, that's fine. That's what we want to hear.
Lester signed my note the first 2 years that I farmed on that
Mm-hmm.
old Butler place and
Mm-hmm.
the old Hornbeck place, about 150 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess he saw that maybe I wasn't doing things that, or might do some things that might jeopardize his place here because him signing my note. And he told me he couldn't sign anymore. So I went into the bank, and Mr. Maddox, there at the DeWitt Bank, to borrow some money for to make a crop. And he looked at me across the table and he said, Waymon, there's all the farmers in Arkansas County they need to be right now, and you don't have any business farming. And I didn't know what I was going to do. So I'd been dealing with Willard Byers at the Alice Chalmers place. So I went across the street from the bank there, well, maybe down the street, and I started talking to him, and I told him, I said, I don't know where I'm going to get any money to farm on. I said, the bank won't loan me any money. And he said, you let me see what I can do. And he said, I know a man that doing business with a place that they might make you a loan. So he called me, or I was in there, and he told me, said, I got you a meeting set up with Production Credit Association in Stuttgart, Arkansas. And at that time, that was the lowest place you could go to borrow money. And I went up there, and they made me a loan. The first loan I made was $6,500. And I did business with them for years and years and years. And so I really had a soft spot in my heart for Willard Byers. And Marvin also. And but you know, when somebody does something for you like that, well, and I appreciate it. I tried to buy the kind of equipment that Willard sold. He sold Oliver's and Alice Chalmers. And but that's kind of the way my life started. And then it just, the Lord blessed us. He gave us opportunity. I rented a farm over here from John Black, because I didn't pass anybody. I didn't ask them if they didn't want to rent the farm. And so I made a deal with John, and I had people tell me that you can't farm for John Black. Can't nobody work with John Black. I farmed his place for 29 years. We never had a cross word. Then I rented some land from blacks, Fairleigh Lake down here. I was probably one of the only people that farmed for blacks that didn't borrow money at First National Bank. But Warren Jennings, the son-in-law of Ms. McKinley, I don't know, he and we didn't run together. We wasn't in the same social clubs. I knew that, social standards. But anyway, he was good to me. And then we got a chance to buy that Derrick place, Martin Derrick's place. Martin didn't care anything about the farm. He wanted to raise cows. And so we worked out a deal with him, and I was going in an international place one day, and a man walked up to me, looked me right in the eye. He said, Waymon, you'll never pay for that farm you just bought over there. You paid too much for it. And but he didn't know how I had it bought. And it belongs to Jeff now. Doesn't belong to me no more. It belongs to Jeff. But Joan and I only own what's right here. And that's the way I want it. But, and so you know, things are not always the way they seem, you know.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's just been good.
yeah.
It's just been good. And
Well, you had some family support